So with wet on wet, you want to use, let me see if I can just pull this over here. You want to get a lot of water, not too much, but you want it to kind of puddle up a little bit, just so you can get a lot of pigment on your brush. And so when we do wet on wet, we really want to throw that paint on. And if you have to dip your brush again, and this can be really cool. You can do this for clouds or landscapes or shadows. So while that's on there, I'm going to take some red. Sorry, this is off screen. I can only do so many things at once. And when you do wet on wet, I think it's important to know that the watercolors will blend together, so it kind of creates this uncontrolled effect. So they will bleed into each other. Of course, I'm using red, so it does look like it's bleeding, but ignore that. Just pretend it's a crazy sunset. But so when you do things like this, and you put, oh, here we go. Then you'll start to see some weird things happen. And you obviously don't want to put too much water on, because then it really starts to get crazy. So I'm gonna stop there, but you can see, you know, there's a lot of fun blending and mixing you can do. So that's wet on wet. And when you're working with wet on wet, again, you want to wait until it dries if you want to start painting things around it. Otherwise, the colors will bleed together. So with wet on dry, I'm going to start off by just filling this in, putting some pigment on the brush with a little bit of water, and just putting this first initial layer of watercolor on here. Just because we will need this to dry before moving forward. So let's say you want to do texture of grass, or you want to do a shadow, or this is the sky and you've got trees. Then you want the background to be dry first. I mean, I can technically just blow on it, but I'm gonna move on to other squares because I don't want to take up too much time. So the alcohol one is actually pretty fun. So again, you're gonna start off and just fill your surface with color, and you want to make sure that it's not too wet and it's not too dry. So this is why I'm asking you guys to experiment first, because you'll kind of get the hang of watercolor once you start just playing with it. And sometimes you'll find some cool things happen with mistakes you make. So I'm going to take some of this alcohol here and just put, with a little tiny dropper, just little drops. And you'll see, look how cool that is. You can create like little sunbursts or sunflowers or stars or jellyfish or fun galaxies, but the alcohol reacts with the water and pushes the water away, I think. I don't know. I'm an art teacher, not a scientist. I just paint. Alright, so next we're gonna do, that's probably dry. Yeah, we'll finish wet on dry. So yeah, if you wanted to paint trees or textures on top of textures, or a texture over the dry, so we can do maybe you can do some grass, you can do more fine details of things, maybe you can do like a tree over here, and by painting trees, it's like you're drawing your hand, and from the hand, little branches like this. So you can just kind of explore. You can do whatever you want. That's the fun of art, is you can be your own artist. So I will cut this short. Okay. So salt is another fun one. Salt I'm gonna use red because it will really bring out the salt effect. So again, I'm gonna just douse this in pigment. But, you know, like I said, you can also do this with 2 colors. You can do wet on wet. So if you wanted, you could do like, you know, like blue and purple or green and yellow and throw some salt on there. But salt can be, it's just a really fun texture to use, and you want to make sure that you want your paper to be like shiny when you throw the salt on there. So just make sure that you've got a good amount of water. So I'm using Himalayan pink sea salt, which is probably the more expensive option to use, but it's what was lying around my kitchen. That's the fun part about this project. So you're just gonna take a little bit and just sprinkle it on. Just like that. You don't want to do too much because it makes a mess and it might get places that you don't want it to go. So just brush the rest off there. So that will kind of do its thing in time. So let's move on to tissue paper, or really anything. You can use tissues, you can use paper towel, you can use sponge. It's a subtractive method of watercolor. So you can create clouds with this. You can create, I don't know. You can create whatever you want to create with it. I would say just play around with it. And, you know, I'm using one color for all of these, but you guys have the whole color palette to experiment with. So when you're doing tissue paper, though, you want this to be wet as well, because otherwise the watercolor will dry before you have time to sop it up with something. So look how cool that can look. So you can you can dab. It makes cool cloud designs. Now my salt is getting everywhere. So there's that. And then last but not least, certainly not least, I love this technique and I just learned how to do it myself, and I think I'm going to be using it in some of my own art. But plastic wrap is your friend. You can use any type of plastic if you don't have plastic wrap, but plastic wrap is probably the easiest to use. So again, you want to throw a big layer of pigment on there and make sure it's nice and wet. And so again, we're just practicing these techniques right now, but you know, I want you to be thinking about how you're going to integrate this into a landscape, or how you could use these in some way in your project coming up. So fun, but get your noggin working. All right, where did my plastic wrap go? It's right in front of me. Okay, so I'm just gonna take a little section of plastic wrap here and boop, just throw it on. Throw it on. And so what it will do is it will bunch up different sections together where the water will start to draw more of the pigment closer or further away. So it will come out looking, I mean, something similar to this one, but you know, everything's gonna be different. So we have 2 fun little examples to play from here. I'm just gonna pull this off right now and see what it looks like. Ooh! So I mean, even like tree bark or something. So I'm gonna have you guys work on this for the rest of class, but go crazy, have fun.